In 2020, a dusty wooden fragment stored in an old cigar box within the University of Aberdeen shattered one of the longest-standing assumptions in archaeology. This forgotten relic, a small piece of cedar wood, wasn't just a misplaced antiquity. It was the missing component of a trio of enigmatic objects known as the Dixon relics, found inside the Great Pyramid of Giza in 1872. Its rediscovery, followed by radiocarbon dating, offered a result so shocking that it forced both skeptics and Egyptologists alike to pause. The wood, sealed in a narrow shaft in the Queen's Chamber, inaccessible since the Great Pyramid's construction, dated not to 2500 BC, the traditionally accepted date of Khufu's reign, but to a staggering 3341 to 3094 BC. This discrepancy of over 5 centuries suggests something few have dared to propose openly. The Great Pyramid may be far older than mainstream Egyptology admits. More than that, it may not even have been built by the Egyptians we know, but by a civilization lost to time. If you're fascinated by the prehistoric civilizations missing from our history books, embark on a remarkable journey with our ebook, Prehistoric Megastructures. This nearly 500-page volume is packed with images and in-depth explorations of some of the most astonishing and unexplained ancient structures ever discovered, monuments that were clearly built with advanced technology from a time long forgotten. There's a limited discount on the ebook, so make sure to click the link in the description or top-pinned comment and uncover the mysteries that mainstream history refuses to acknowledge. The tale of the Dixon relics begins not in a university archive, but in the silent, echoing chambers of the Great Pyramid itself. In 1872, Wayman Dixon, an engineer, and James Grant, a physician and adventurer, were exploring the Queen's Chamber of the Pyramid. This chamber, unlike the King's Chamber, was once considered unfinished, but Dixon and Grant suspected otherwise. After noting suspicious cracks and faint airflows along the walls, they decided to investigate more deeply. With the boldness of 19th-century explorers, they chiseled into the north and south walls of the Queen's Chamber, revealing 2 previously unknown narrow shafts, air channels, or perhaps something far more mysterious. What they found inside the northern shaft became known as the Dixon relics, a small copper hook, a stone ball, and a rod of cedar wood. 2 of these items, the hook and the ball, were sent to the British Museum and catalogued. The wooden fragment, however, remained in Grant's possession, eventually donated to the University of Aberdeen in 1946 by his daughter. For decades, it vanished from view, misplaced among countless uncatalogued items. Then, in 2020, curatorial assistant Abir Eladini, herself Egyptian by birth, stumbled upon the long-lost object. Nestled in a cigar box labeled with Egypt's old flag, this small, fragmented cedar rod emerged as a potential keystone in the mystery of the Great Pyramid's true origins. What makes the Dixon relics so profoundly significant is not just what they are, but where they were found. The northern shaft of the Queen's Chamber, where the 3 relics were discovered, was sealed at both ends. The upper end does not connect to the pyramid's exterior. The lower end, prior to Dixon and Grant's intervention, was blocked by 2 massive load-bearing limestone blocks forming part of the chamber wall. There were no gaps, no signs of intrusion, and no evidence of tomb robbers having ever entered the channel. This matters because it means the objects inside must have been placed there during construction. In other words, they were sealed in stone when the pyramid itself was built. There is no plausible scenario, no secret tunnel, no hidden breach that would allow later placement of the relics, and that is the fulcrum on which this entire controversy rests. If the items are 500 years older than Khufu's reign, then we are left with only one conclusion. The Great Pyramid is older than we have been told, possibly much older. Radiocarbon dating is the gold standard of archaeological chronology. The dating of the Dixon Wood fragment performed in 2020 yielded a calibrated age range between 3,341 and 3,094 BC. Centuries before Khufu is said to have ruled Egypt from 2580 to 2560 BC. Some have tried to dismiss this result by citing the long lifespan of cedar trees. Lebanese cedar, the source of most Old Kingdom wood imports, is known to live hundreds or even thousands of years. Could the wood simply be old when it was used? Could it have come from the center of a 1,000-year-old tree? Possibly. But even if that were the case, we still face a serious problem. The shaft in which the relics were found was not some open corridor where items could be inserted at a later date. It was sealed at both ends, buried within the very architecture of the pyramid, locked in by design. If Khufu built the pyramid around 2580 BC, how could a piece of cedar, even if it were from a 1,000-year-old tree, have made it inside during construction unless it had already been fashioned into a tool or object centuries earlier? This argument, while frequently cited to explain away the anomaly, begins to fall apart under scrutiny. Wood was a precious commodity in ancient Egypt. Recycled wood was common, yes, but the use of centuries-old tree rings is not a reliable excuse for this kind of discrepancy. The radiocarbon data implies either that the object was already very old when it was placed there, which would itself be curious, or that the pyramid is older than Khufu. But if it wasn't Khufu, who built it? The Great Pyramid is the most precise stone structure on Earth. Its footprint aligns perfectly to true north. The base is leveled to within a fraction of an inch. The blocks, some weighing as much as 80 tons, were arranged with such exactitude that even a razor blade cannot fit between many of them. These facts alone suggest a level of architectural mastery far beyond what mainstream archaeology credits to Old Kingdom Egypt. The notion that such a monument, unrivaled in precision and complexity, was the first pyramid ever built in such form strains credibility. Would a civilization truly begin their stone architecture with a wonder of the world, then produce only cruder copies afterward? What if instead Khufu was not the builder but a restorer, or simply a usurper of an already ancient site? The idea of a pre-dynastic origin for the Great Pyramid has long been the subject of numerous theories, from Immanuel Velikovsky and Charles Hapgood to Graham Hancock. These thinkers have suggested that remnants of a lost, highly advanced civilization survived a global cataclysm near the end of the last ice age, approximately 10,500 BC, preserving fragments of their knowledge. They argue that the Great Pyramid, with its mathematical constants, geodetic alignments, and unexplained engineering, is a legacy of this forgotten world. The Dixon relic, dated to over 500 years before Khufu and sealed inside the pyramid since its construction, may be the first physical evidence to support this theory. Beyond the wood, the other two Dixon artifacts deserve renewed attention. The copper hook, described as a forked implement, and the granite ball, both now in the British Museum, are odd finds. Their purpose is unknown. Were they tools, ritual objects, construction aids? Some researchers speculate that they may have been symbolic, perhaps representing elements of measurement or control. Others argue they were functional, possibly used in the positioning of heavy stones or in resonance-based engineering, a theory tied to ideas of acoustic levitation and advanced harmonic technologies. They may have been used in ways we do not yet comprehend, perhaps in conjunction with lost techniques of engineering or energy manipulation. But here's what many forget. The relics recovered in Aberdeen was only a fragment of something larger. Dixon himself noted in his diary that the wooden piece was broken off from a longer section, and that he broke it accidentally while jabbing at the contents of the shaft with a long iron probe. In his own words, bit of wood broken off from a larger part measuring 5 inches, fractured accidentally. This was not debris. It was part of a complete wooden tool, a square section rod still embedded in the shaft to this day, partially visible beyond the 9th block, where the shaft angles 45 degrees. Photographs and footage from Rudolf Gantenbrink's robot, which explored the northern Queen's Chamber shaft in the 1990s, confirmed the existence of a square wooden rod still sitting on the shaft floor. It runs along the eastern wall and extends into the darkness beyond the robot's turning capability. At the bend in the shaft, where it shifts 45 degrees westward, seemingly to avoid the Grand Gallery, the rod continues toward a curious rectangular structure. Here's where things get interesting. Initially, some assumed this wooden rod was just a fragment of Dixon's iron tool, but that theory falls apart under scrutiny. Dixon's rod was hexagonal in section, while the wooden one still in the shaft is square. Even more telling, Dixon's iron rod is still lodged in the right wall, on top of the wooden rod. The square rod lies beneath it, undisturbed since ancient times. This wooden rod was not something Dixon inserted. It was already there, and it still is. Let's go back to the hook. The artifact found in 1872 and now held by the British Museum is often described simply as a copper-forked implement, but Dixon's own notes add crucial detail. It was bronze green with incrustations, once riveted onto a wooden handle. The hook has 2 rivet holes, and within the same shaft lies a small rectangular block with 2 matching holes, exactly spaced to align with the hook. This suggests, beyond any reasonable doubt, that the copper hook was once mounted to this very rod, making it not just an artifact, but part of a larger tool. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't random. It was mechanical. A grappling or cleaning tool inserted into the shaft, or perhaps even built into it, during construction. If so, we're looking at a piece of equipment from the pyramid's builders themselves, not priests or tomb robbers or ritual activity. The full length of the rod is still unknown. The robot could not traverse the bend in the shaft, and the so-called Pyramid Rover expedition in the early 2000s, which re-explored the shaft, never released raw footage or detailed documentation of what was seen further in. Why? What's there? Beyond the rod, where the shaft levels out again, Gantenbrink captured images of a strange rectangular object with a possible knob or feature on top. It's unclear whether this is a block, a cap, a casing, or something entirely different. Could it be a ceiling slab, a plug, a symbolic mechanism, or perhaps a lost component of the original design, part of the pyramid's hypothesized energetic or acoustic functions? No one knows. But what's clear is this: the copper hook, the cedar rod, and the matching riveted base form a functional physical system, one still embedded inside the pyramid, untouched by history or excavation. And crucially, if the piece in Aberdeen was broken from the rod that remains in place, then we have another datable piece of the pyramid's original construction still inside, one that could be tested, measured, and analyzed. But it hasn't been. Why hasn't it been retrieved? Why isn't it being studied? Any serious investigation into the mysteries of the Great Pyramid, especially those involving the Queen's Chamber shafts, the Dixon relics, or underground anomalies, will eventually run into one name: Dr. Zahi Hawass. A former Minister of Antiquities and longtime head of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, SCA, in Egypt, Hawass has been both praised and criticized for his role as the most visible and powerful figure in Egyptian archaeology over the last 3 decades. On the one hand, he has helped protect Egypt's heritage and popularize its wonders to the world. On the other, he has drawn growing criticism for his tight control over research, excavations, access to data, and public narratives. For many independent researchers, historians, and engineers, Dr. Hawass is not simply a scholar, he is a gatekeeper. And in the case of the Dixon relics and the Queen's Chamber shafts, he has become the face of obstruction. After Gantenbrink's discovery, instead of celebrating it, Hawass shut down the project. Gantenbrink was publicly criticized, and access to the pyramid shafts was revoked. For years afterward, he was not allowed back to continue his investigation. What about the northern shaft, where the Dixon rod still lies? Why haven't we seen what lies beyond the 45-degree bend? Why hasn't the rest of the rod, or the strange rectangular object, been recovered and tested? These are the questions many researchers ask, and the answer again and again seems to be because Zahi Hawass denies access. Throughout his long tenure, Dr. Hawass has repeatedly been accused of denying permits to independent or foreign researchers who challenge the mainstream narrative, shutting down digs that might reveal pre-dynastic or controversial findings, and enforcing a singular narrative that the pyramids were built as tombs by pharaohs using copper tools and human labor alone, with no room for alternative theories. While this may be standard academic gatekeeping to protect against pseudoscience, critics argue that Hawass has taken this too far, censoring valid questions and blocking promising lines of inquiry. Notably, Dr. Robert Schoch's Sphinx erosion research, which suggests the monument may date back to 7,000–10,000 BC, has long been dismissed by Hawass, despite support from geology experts. Similarly, Graham Hancock and John Anthony West, who questioned the dynastic timeline, have been ridiculed or marginalized. With the rediscovery of the Dixon rod fragment in 2020 and the realization that its other half is still in the shaft, one would expect urgent follow-up, an immediate push to retrieve and date the remaining wood, to verify whether the original results hold, but nothing has been done. The Dixon relic may be small, but its implications are enormous. When considered alone, it raises serious questions about the accepted chronology of the Great Pyramid. But when placed alongside a growing constellation of anomalies found across Egypt, the evidence begins to form a powerful argument that the civilization responsible for Egypt's megalithic wonders may not have been the dynastic Egyptians at all, but an earlier, far more technologically advanced culture that predated even the Old Kingdom. These echoes of a lost past are scattered across the land of the Nile, hiding in plain sight, each whispering the same story, a story we have yet to fully comprehend. At Saqqara, beneath the sands near the step pyramid of Djoser, lies the Serapeum, a labyrinthine underground complex rediscovered in the 19th century. Within its corridors stand over 20 massive granite boxes, each weighing upwards of 70 to 100 tons, with their lids alone estimated at 30 tons. These monolithic sarcophagi were allegedly intended to house the Apis bulls, sacred animals in Egyptian religion. But the scale, precision, and mystery of how these enormous boxes were transported in such narrow underground passages defy the capabilities of dynastic Egyptians. What makes the Serapeum astonishing isn't merely the size of the boxes, but the craftsmanship. The inner surfaces of these boxes are polished to a mirror finish, with tolerances within thousandths of an inch, standards that would challenge even modern machining tools. Engineers like Christopher Dunn, who have studied these boxes firsthand, assert that their manufacture would have required knowledge of precision cutting and industrial-level tooling. These are not the kind of objects one expects from a Bronze Age civilization. They seem almost alien in their perfection, relics perhaps of a forgotten high technology, misplaced in time. North of Giza, in a restricted military zone known as Zayed El Aryan, lies the remnants of what some researchers believe could have been one of the most technologically advanced structures ever built in ancient Egypt, the so-called unfinished pyramid. What remains is a massive, square-cut shaft, over 20 meters deep, at the base of which rests a giant rose granite box embedded into the floor, its dimensions and finish comparable to those in the Serapeum, but no casing stones, no blocks, and no superstructure remain above ground. The site is almost never discussed in mainstream Egyptology, likely due to its inaccessibility, but those who've studied it from historical reports or satellite imagery believe it represents a project abandoned, or one that predated known dynasties and was either buried, repurposed, or concealed. Like the Great Pyramid's granite-lined King's Chamber or the shafts of the Queen's Chamber, the subterranean architecture at Zayed El Aryan suggests a knowledge of geotechnical engineering far more advanced than what dynastic Egypt is credited with. And the presence of that solitary granite box, containing strange black liquid, remains a mystery to what its true purpose really was. With no evidence of how it was lowered into place, adds fuel to the mystery. At Aswan, the ancient granite quarries reveal another enigma, the unfinished obelisk, a 1,200-ton monument still attached to the bedrock. Had it been completed, it would have been the largest single stone obelisk ever erected, but it was abandoned due to deep cracks in the stone. What truly baffles researchers, however, are the scoop marks found in and around the obelisk. Deep circular patterns line the trench where workers began to extract it. According to some engineers, these grooves resemble the kinds of patterns left behind by scooping the granite out like a spoon to ice cream, suggesting some kind of granite softening technology was used rather than stone hammers and dolerite pounding balls, as is traditionally suggested. The idea that ancient Egyptians used dolerite pounding stones to grind down such a massive piece of granite with perfect linearity and consistent depth seems increasingly implausible. Granite is one of the hardest stones on Earth. Working it with primitive tools should leave crude, jagged surfaces. But here, and elsewhere, we find smooth, concave cuts and striations that are difficult to explain without reference to machinery. This raises a fundamental question. Were these tools, if they existed, passed down and lost? Or did they originate with a culture that predates dynastic Egypt altogether? All over Egypt, from Giza to Saqqara, from Dashur to Abu Sir, there exist examples of precision-cut stone boxes, sarcophagi, and chamber blocks that exhibit a quality of workmanship beyond anything else found in their surrounding context. Some of the granite boxes in pyramid chambers and other sites show evidence of advanced techniques, perfectly square corners, planed surfaces, and internal cavity walls that are consistent in thickness throughout. These are not the results of trial and error chiseling. They are the work of a culture with a deep understanding of geometry, engineering, and, possibly, machine tooling. In some cases, these boxes contain right-angle cuts with radii that match modern milling tools. The boreholes in granite cores studied by Dunn and others show helical striations, the kind that are only produced by high-speed rotary drills applying downward pressure. These drill marks are not incidental. They are reproducible patterns consistent with advanced fabrication. Yet no such tools have ever been found in the archaeological record. How were they made? The official answer remains elusive, and that silence only grows louder when we consider the next anomaly. Housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, the so-called schist disk, or Saqqara vein, is an object unlike anything else from ancient Egypt. It was discovered in the tomb of Prince Sabu from the First Dynasty, approximately 3000 BC, but its form defies the artistic or utilitarian conventions of its time. Carved from a single piece of metamorphic schist, a fragile material that flakes easily, the object is shaped like a modern turbine or impeller. Its delicate veins and balanced symmetry suggest it once rotated. But why would such a design emerge thousands of years before the invention of the wheel was common in Egypt? Mainstream scholars call it a vase, or possibly a lotus flower stand. But no comparable examples exist, and no one can explain how it was carved from such a brittle stone with copper chisels. To alternative researchers, the schist disk may represent either a symbolic remnant of lost machinery or an actual machine component buried with reverence after its original purpose was lost. Its existence challenges more than the chronology. It challenges the paradigm of what ancient people were capable of. Scattered in museums and storage vaults are hundreds of mysterious artifacts that suggest rotational symmetry, a hallmark of lathe work. Bowls, jars, and vases made from basalt, diorite, and granite, stones far harder than iron, exhibit internal and external surfaces that are perfectly concentric. The walls are uniformly thin, curved with mathematical grace, and in some cases, exhibit spiral patterns indicating rotation during manufacture. Traditional explanations cite long-forgotten techniques using abrasive sand and manual labor, but such methods should leave inconsistent results, not the mathematical perfection that these artifacts display. Christopher Dunn and other engineers have compared these ancient stone vessels to modern machine-lathed objects. Some show internal fluting and mirrored finishes, signatures of rotary tools, not chisels. So why is none of this acknowledged in academic literature? Are we to believe that ancient masons with hand tools achieved feats our modern CNC machines would struggle to replicate? Or should we accept the possibility that these artifacts are not from dynastic Egypt, but from a precursor civilization, technologically sophisticated and largely erased from history? None of these anomalies can be viewed in isolation. The Dixon relic, dated to centuries before Khufu, gains new meaning when viewed through the lens of these other enigmas. The impossibly large granite boxes of the Serapeum, the megalithic shaft and mysterious box at Zayat el Aryan, the unfinished yet precision-scored obelisk at Aswan, the mirror-smooth sarcophagi, the drill cores, the lathe-turned stoneware, the turbine-like schist disk. Each one might be dismissed with enough mental gymnastics, but taken together, they form a pattern. That pattern points not just to a missing chapter in Egypt's history, but to an entire forgotten epoch, one in which knowledge of vibration, geometry, precision engineering, and perhaps energy itself was deeply understood. An epoch erased by time, buried beneath later dynasties who inherited the ruins and claimed the glory. If we are to understand the true history of Egypt, and perhaps of human civilization itself, we must be willing to listen to what these artifacts are telling us. The Dixon relic opens the door. The granite boxes, lathed vessels, and schist disk walk us through it. They whisper that the Great Pyramid may not be a tomb, that the Serapeum may not be a bull necropolis, that the builders of these wonders did not wield copper chisels, but something far more sophisticated, now lost to time. Perhaps, beneath our feet and behind our assumptions, the ruins of a civilization older than Egypt, older than Sumer, and older than history itself are waiting to be rediscovered. The Dixon relics, trapped inside the core of the Great Pyramid, was never meant to be found, but it was. And now it speaks, not alone, but with the chorus of ancient stones, echoing across time, asking us to remember what we have forgotten. Why then is this possibility so fiercely resisted by mainstream archaeology? Part of the answer lies in the nature of academic paradigms. Changing the date of the Great Pyramid's construction would not be a minor revision. It would require rewriting the entire history of ancient Egypt. It would invalidate timelines, dynastic succession, and accepted models of cultural evolution. Moreover, it would open the door to questions far outside the comfort zone of modern scholarship. Who were these earlier people? What happened to them? Why did their civilization vanish? And what did they know that we do not? It is easier then to explain away the data, to say the wood was old when it was used, to argue the object was intrusive, even when the evidence says otherwise, to keep the anomaly within the box. The rediscovery of the Dixon relics is more than just a footnote in Egyptology. It is a reminder that the sands of time still hold secrets. It is a physical, datable artifact sealed inside the greatest monument on Earth, and it doesn't belong. It shouldn't be there. And yet it is. If the pyramid was truly built in the mid-3rd millennium BC, the cedar should not predate it. If the relic is as old as it appears, the entire framework of the pyramid's history needs re-evaluation. In isolation, the Dixon relics may not prove that the Great Pyramid is 500 years older or more. But in conjunction with the site's engineering mysteries, astronomical alignments, geological oddities, and historical inconsistencies, it strengthens the case that something is very wrong with the Orthodox timeline. And maybe, just maybe, it is not the pyramid that is out of place, but our understanding of history itself.